Welcome to the deep dive. If you're joining us today, you are exactly the kind of learner we love. Someone who doesn't just, accept the textbook version of history.
Yeah, the people who want to look under the hood.
Exactly. You want to know what happens when you look at the raw data from a completely different angle. I mean, think about the last time you used a translation app.
Oh, right.
You type in a word, and it just spits out a neat, clean equivalent in another language. And we kind of have this expectation that translating ancient history works the exact same way.
Like it's just a simple math equation or something.
Right. You find a clay tablet, you decode the cuneiform, and the scholar points to a symbol and says, there it is. That means king. That means water.
Yeah, it feels binary. And I mean, it's incredibly comforting for us to believe the past is that visible, right?
Yeah.
That it can be neatly categorized and put behind glass in a museum display case.
Definitely.
But language, especially ancient, rarely that sterile. It's messy. It breathes,
And today, we are jumping right into the muddiest, most fascinating waters imaginable. We have our hands on this working document by a researcher named Karekin Sevan Tatev.
Yes. And it is a wild ride.
It really is. His research completely upends the foundational myths of human civilization. Like, we are talking about the ancient Sumerian stories of the Seven Sages.
The beings who supposedly brought knowledge to humanity.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore Tatev's radical new lens. He uses what he calls an Armenian codex to decode these Mesopotamian myths.
Which completely shifts the paradigm.
It really does. He takes what has always been read as a standard story of, divine punishment and translates it into this mind-bending map of human consciousness, sound, and cosmic geometry.
But to really appreciate the magnitude of what this research is proposing, you kind of have to understand the traditional baseline first.
Right. Let's set the stage for the learner.
So if you crack open any standard textbook on Sumerian and Akkadian history, you will find the APKALLU.
The APKALLU.
Yeah. These were mythical beings, and the standard, universally accepted, literal translation of their title, APKALLU, is Great Men of the Water.
Because the standard myth says they emerged from the Abzu, right? The cosmic freshwater ocean.
Exactly. They're almost always depicted in ancient art as amphibious, so like half fish, half human sages.
Right.
And the story goes that they came out of the sea to teach early humanity the foundational arts of civilization. We're talking about writing, agriculture, how to build a temple.
How to organize a city, all the big stuff.
Right. But then the myth takes a very dark turn.
Yeah, this is where it gets weird.
According to the standard texts, after the Great Flood, a new generation of human sages took over for the APKALLU. But these later sages supposedly committed these terrible crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And because of these crimes, they were severely punished by Marduk, who was, the chief god of the Mesopotamian pantheon.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because if they were just teaching people how to plant wheat and write things down, why would Marduk be so furious?
That's a great question.
This is the part of the standard history that always felt completely off to me. Because if you read the accounts of these so-called crimes, they weren't moral failings.
No, not at all.
Like, these sages weren't out committing murder or stealing from people. They were ritual offenses. They were introducing forbidden knowledge or doing purifications improperly.
They were rocking the boat.
Exactly. They were essentially disrupting the rigid cosmic order that Marduk had set up. Which makes you wonder, were these sages actually criminals, or were they more like ancient whistleblowers sharing secrets that the ruling gods desperately wanted to keep hidden?
And that is exactly the question Tatev's research forces us to ask.
Yeah.
To understand who these sages really were, we have to recognize that the standard myth is essentially the victor's version of history.
We're basically getting Marduk's press release.
That's a perfect way to put it. Marduk's press release. So Tatev argues that if you want the truth, you have to look at the actual names of the sages. But, and this is crucial, you cannot use the standard Sumerian dictionaries that academics have relied on for the last century.
Right.
You have to look at them through the Armenian Codex.
Okay, I'm going to need you to explain the mechanics of that. Because jumping from ancient Mesopotamia to Armenia sounds like a massive leap. How does that connection actually work?
It sounds like a leap until you look at a map and consider how language actually evolves. I mean, Mesopotamia wasn't a hermetically sealed bubble.
Sure.
Just to the north, you have the Armenian highlands. These are ancient, highly influential regions like Urartu and the volcanic massif of Mount Ergits.
So there's a lot of geographic proximity.
Exactly. Languages bleed into each other across borders, especially at the root level. So Tatev's methodology is to take these ancient static Sumerian syllables and apply the phonetic roots of the Armenian language to them.
Okay.
And when he does that, these names stop being just nouns. They transform into descriptions of processes.
Okay, let's see this in action. Walk us through how this codex changes the meaning of the sages.
Let's trace the journey of the first few. So the standard academic translation of the very first sage, UANNA, is something like, "Who finished the plans for heaven and earth?"
Which sounds like an architect.
Right. But in Tatev's codex, you break it down phonetically. The prefix U represents the swell, the arc, or the dome. And ANNA, or in, represents the concept of the nine.
Okay.
So instead of a guy with a blueprint, UANNA becomes the ninefold in of the heavenly waters.
Wait, so it's not a person at all. It's a place, like a cosmic womb.
Exactly. It's an initiatic stage of gestation. And this leads right into the second stage, UANNEDUGGA.
What's the standard translation for that one?
Standard history says endowed with comprehensive intelligence. But here is where the linguistic mechanics get really interesting. In the codex, the syllable DUKI is recognized as having phonetically drifted over time.
Like how consonants soften over centuries.
Precisely. DUKI links phonetically to the root DUKI, which in this context means guide.
So if you apply that shift, the second sage is the guide emerging from those heavenly waters. It is like an evolutionary progression. You have the womb, and then you have the guide coming out of it.
And this progression continues. The third sage, ENMEDUGGA,
Yep.
contains the vital syllable EN-E.
Me, right.
In this framework, me represents the liminal space, the threshold. So this sage becomes the threshold holder, the guide taking you across into immortality.
Wow.
Then the fourth, ENMEGALAMMA, which traditionally meant who was born in a house.
That's a bit mundane.
Very mundane, but decoded using gal, meaning threshing floor, and amma, meaning mother. He becomes the great threshing floor of the mother.
The threshing floor. So that's the stage where opposites are separated, right? Where the wheat is separated from the chaff of your consciousness.
Exactly.
I'm totally tracking with this evolutionary journey, but, and I remember this from the notes, the research places a massive emphasis on the fifth sage, ENMEBULUGGA.
Oh, yes.
If I remember correctly, the standard translation for him is incredibly bleak. It paints him as the Lord of Disaster or Rebellion.
Yes, the standard reading makes him sound like a bringer of absolute chaos.
Which, as we pointed out earlier, fits Marduk's narrative perfectly.
Right. If Marduk is trying to maintain order, he is going to label this sage as the Lord of Disaster. But Tatev applies the Armenian roots to the back half of the name.
Okay, let's hear it.
BUL translates to a love apple, a golden apple, or a polyp, essentially a dense, sweet knot of growth. And GA means to hold.
Wait, so if you put that together, he isn't the Lord of Disaster at all.
No.
He is the threshold lord holding the golden apple.
Yes, he is holding the golden apple at the crossing.
I absolutely love that, because think about how universal that trope is. I mean, for you listening right now, when you hear forbidden fruit or golden apple, where does your mind immediately go?
The Garden of Eden.
Exactly. The fruit of knowledge in Eden, or the golden apple of discord that started the Trojan War. It is this incredibly deep human archetype.
It really is.
It completely transforms Marduk's idea of a disaster. Like, it wasn't a natural disaster like a hurricane. The disaster was a dense knot of desire and forbidden knowledge. The sage was offering a fruit that opens your eyes.
And this strikes right at the heart of the ancient world's greatest theological and political schism.
How so?
Well, if you open your eyes, you see the artificial structures around you. You might not obey the chief god anymore. Which brings us back to the title of these sages, APKALLU.
Right.
Why was holding this apple of knowledge such a horrific crime to Marduk? The answer is actually hidden in the linguistic hinge of that very word.
Okay, because the standard translation is great man of water, but the source breaks down the prefix AB in a way that honestly melted my brain a little bit.
It's brilliant.
Explain how a single prefix can mean two completely opposite things.
It is a phenomenal linguistic anomaly. So in the Armenian root system, the prefix ap functions as a negation. It means un or reverse.
Okay.
But the root abba means in accordance with. So you have the exact same phonetic root holding entirely opposite meanings simultaneously.
That's wild.
Right. To be at the AB means you are standing at the reversing gate. You can step through it to conform and be in accordance with the system, or you can step back to reverse and undo the system.
It's like the word cleave in English.
Oh, yes.
You can cleave a piece of wood in half to separate it, or you can cleave to your partner, meaning to stick together, It is a contronym.
That is a perfect analogy. So let's look at the rest of the word. Gal doesn't just mean great. It connects to the word for threshing floor or a halo.
And Lu.
Lu isn't just man. It represents the oozing liquid mound, the conscious all.
So if we smash all those decoded roots together, APKALLU goes from great man of water to something intensely philosophical.
It really did.
It translates to the reverser accordant one, haloed on the threshing floor of the living deep.
Exactly. They aren't literally half fish.
Yeah.
They are conceptually amphibious.
Meaning they have the ability to exist in rigid, structured environments, but they also have the power to reverse that artificial structure and return to the natural primordial flow.
They are the ultimate systemic disruptors, and this is exactly why Marduk had to punish them.
Let's try to visualize this conflict for the listener. Imagine Marduk as the strict, traditional headmaster of sprawling boarding school.
I like this.
He believes in rigid architecture. He builds ziggurats, he locks doors, he sets up strict curricula and gatekeepers. And he does this because he genuinely believes that if you don't have rigid structure, the students will just descend into absolute chaos.
He's terrified of the chaos.
Right. But the APKALLU, on the other hand, are the radical open-air teachers out on the lawn. They believe knowledge is like water. It shouldn't be dammed up in a temple. It should flow freely to everyone, everywhere.
That is an excellent way to frame it. And, to be fair to the source material, it actually rehabilitates Marduk a bit.
Yeah, it doesn't just dunk on him.
Right. It doesn't paint him as a cartoon villain just hoarding power for the fun of it. The text points out that both Marduk and the APKALLU are actually operating from the exact same source code.
The same source code.
The dialogue in Tatev's document notes that they both share the same bag of 10 DAS, or data.
The same bag of 10, meaning they have the same foundational understanding of the universe. They just disagree on how to use it.
Exactly. Marduk chose to replace the natural cosmic truth flow, an ancient concept known as Rada, with architecture by decree.
Because he thought we couldn't handle it.
Yes. He looked at humanity and decided, they are not ready. The threshold is too dangerous. If I don't build a vault to control this knowledge, they will drown in it.
Well, the APKALLU looked at the exact same threshold and said, a threshold only exists to be crossed.
Precisely.
Okay, if they're both pulling from this same bag of 10, we really need to understand what is inside that bag, because the source is very clear that it is not just math.
No.
It's not just counting 1, 2, 3 to manage inventory. The researcher maps out these numbers, 0 through 9, as actual frequencies or states of human consciousness.
This is the core of how they view the evolution of the mind. It's a number wheel.
Right. Walk us through it.
So it starts with 0, or O. This is conceptualized as the void. Think of it as the colander's hole, the necessary empty space through which all things must pass.
Okay, the void.
From there, you have 1 meg. This is the monad alone. The pure, undisturbed idea of existence before anything else happens.
The womb.
Yes. And then 2, your G, is the split. It's the birth into H2O, the realization of reflection. The monad suddenly looks in the mirror and realizes it's separate.
Got it.
And you can see how this builds, right? 3, Yerrick, introduces the first angle, the triangle, which represents the birth of complex conscious awareness.
Right, the triangle.
4, Hurix, is the compass where the brain starts forming directions in internal structures.
Setting up boundaries.
Exactly. 5, H, bang, is the breath rising up to the dome of the sky and returning. But where this map becomes truly profound is when we reach the number 6, the EG ones.
The source calls this the devil's lesson, right?
Yes.
Let's camp out on number 6 for a second, because this is where the map feels incredibly visceral. 6 is described as the vertical line, going straight up and down. Yeah, it represents the stage in our consciousness where we realize we can be bad. Think about your own life, learner. Think about the friction of existing in a society with rules.
It's heavy.
6 is the realization of structure, and structure inherently hurts. Inner peace becomes too loud, so we rebel against it. We fall, and we learn from the pain of that fall.
It is the necessary friction of existence. You cannot evolve without the fall of 6.
Because that leads to 7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that friction is what prepares you for 7, UOT. 7 is the still point within.
The center.
Right. After the rebellion and the pain of 6, you find your unique internal center. You establish the core of who you are, preparing your mind to finally leave the hearth and step out into the wider world.
And then the final numbers complete the journey. 8, UT, represents the boundaries, the spiral where you transform within set limits.
Right.
9, INN, is the cone of light, the conscious eye looking down from above. And 10, DICE is the conscious all. The complete bag of data that you can now choose to pull from.
It's a beautiful system.
It is, but I have to call a timeout here.
Uh-oh, what's the issue?
As I was reading through the source material, the researcher takes this profound, ancient Mesopotamian Armenian map of consciousness and claims it perfectly maps onto a famous English nursery rhyme.
Yes.
The one about counting magpies. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told, 8 for a wish, 9 for a kiss, 10 for a bird you must not miss.
It is quite the jump.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because you cannot tell me an ancient Sumerian myth literally translates into a British nursery rhyme. How is that logically possible? Is the source claiming some direct historical lineage here?
It is a jarring juxtaposition, I agree. But the source isn't necessarily arguing that an ancient Sumerian handed a clay tablet to a 19th century British peasant.
Okay, good.
What it is arguing is that human consciousness has a shared universal architecture.
Oh, interesting.
Right. If the numbers 0 through 9 represent fundamental stages of psychological development, then any culture that deeply observes human nature is going to encode those exact same stages into their folklore.
So it's less about a direct historical translation and more about a shared human algorithm.
Exactly. And when you lay the ancient number wheel over that nursery rhyme, the deepest mysteries of the rhyme suddenly make logical sense.
Give me an example.
Well, look at the number 7. Why does the rhyme say 7 is a secret never to be told?
Because in the APKALLU number wheel, 7 is the still point.
Yes. 7 is the center of the compass. You literally cannot tell the secret of 7 because the secret is exactly where you stand.
Oh, wow.
My internal center is completely different from your internal center. Once a person reaches that stage of consciousness, the truth becomes entirely experiential.
It's subjective.
Exactly. I can't give you my center, and I can't explain it to you. It is a secret that inherently cannot be told.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. It grounds this abstract math in a very real psychological reality.
It does?
But the source goes even further. It claims this esoteric math isn't just an idea in our heads. It physically manifests in the real world.
This is where it gets very tactile.
Yeah. How did the ancients believe you could actually touch or interact with the state of consciousness?
Through breath, through stone, and through a very specific instrument.
Okay.
This takes us back to the physical origins of the first sage. In this codex, the sage wasn't snapped into existence by a god standing outside of nature. The earth itself ejected the first sage as a lithic child, a stone.
A stone.
Specifically, of Vishapakar, or dragonstone, from the volcanic massif of Mount Aragats in Armenia.
But the text says it wasn't just a solid, unyielding rock, right? It was pierced with natural holes, like a colander.
And those holes are the crucial mechanism. They existed so that breath could pass through the stone. The Sumerian name Ea, which is often associated with the god of water and the first stage, is decoded in this framework as H2O plus atmosphere. It is the breath of the Mother Earth passing through the empty spaces of the stone.
And this brings us to one of the most beautiful metaphors in the entire document.
The duduk.
Yes, the duduk. This concept of breath passing through holes to create consciousness is perfectly mirrored in this traditional Armenian instrument. It's an ancient woodwind instrument made of apricot wood.
Beautiful sounding instrument, by the way.
Oh, hauntingly beautiful. And the mechanics of how it is built and played serve as a literal physical map of this entire philosophy, which the text refers to as ACTIV8.
Let's look at the anatomy of the instrument. It has exactly 8 finger holes.
Right.
The 7 holes on the top represent the 7 APKALLU.
Makes sense.
The single thumb hole underneath represents the 8th orb, that boundary-crossing spiral of transformation we talked about in the number wheel.
Okay.
The hollow tube of the instrument represents the cosmic pillar joining heaven and earth. And the reed at the top is called EL's crown, the pure existence that flows into the tube.
And the person playing the instrument, they represent the Lu. They are the conscious, all-breathing life through the whole system. But the true poetry here is in the mechanics of playing it. Think about what it takes to play a song on a woodwind instrument. You have to cover and uncover specific holes.
You're restricting the flow.
Right. You are imposing structure on the breath. You are doing exactly what Marduk did, creating architecture. You are telling the breath, you can go here, but you cannot go here.
You are forcing the breath to conform to a structure to make a specific sound. But to finish the song,
To truly complete the cycle.
right, to complete the cycle, you have to let go. The source describes this incredible, poetic release.
Yeah.
To let go is to stop holding the holes. The breath is allowed to pass freely through all of them without restriction.
It just flows.
The sound fades and becomes silence. The silence expands into a halo. And then the instrument, which is made of wood, metaphorically returns to the tree. The tree returns to the mountain returns to the mother.
It is the ultimate physical expression of the APKALLU philosophy. You can use the structure, you can play the notes, you can build the ziggurats, but ultimately the highest goal is the free flow of the breath.
The complete release of artificial boundaries.
It's about returning to the natural cosmic truth flow, the Raita, that Marduk was so afraid of.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, we started this deep dive looking at what seemed like a pretty standard, dusty myth of Mesopotamian fish gods who got in trouble for breaking ritual rules.
Right.
But by applying this Armenian codex, by refusing to accept the static textbook translation and instead looking at how the roots of these words act as processes, we uncovered a profound map of human consciousness.
We really did.
We are the breath passing through the instrument of the universe.
And I want to emphasize that this isn't just ancient trivia. It has direct relevance to you, learner, right now.
Absolutely.
Just like the ancient APKALLU, you are navigating your own threshing floor every single day. We live in an era defined by massive information overload.
Oh, a flood of it.
You are constantly having to separate truth from illusion, the wheat from the chaff, and in your own life, you are faced with the exact same choice Marduk and the sages faced.
Do you build a wall or do you open the gates?
Right. Are you going to build rigid architecture to keep yourself safe? Are you going to lock the doors and only let certain information in? Or are you going to allow for the free flow of knowledge even when it feels like a chaotic flood?
And to be fair, Marduk wasn't entirely wrong. Sometimes we need the six, the vertical line, the structure. If we don't have any rules, we just have noise.
True.
But if we stay locked in that structure forever, we never reach the seven. We never find our own unique center.
And this raises an important question for you to mull over as we wrap up today. Think back to that number wheel, where 0 through 9 are just different frequencies of consciousness that you carry around in your own bag of 10.
Yeah.
And remember that 7 is the secret center where only you stand. Which frequency are you choosing to look through today? Are you tightly covering all the holes of your life to force a very specific, rigid tune? Or are you finally ready to let the breath pass freely and see what the silence reveals?